Welcome, I'm John, and this is sort of a devlog for my game Ultimate Soldier Trials. It's also going to be a little bit of sort of like porting guide and a bit of like porting knowledge. So, as you may or may have not seen on my channel, I've been making a series of of videos detailing how to create a whole bunch of different mechanics that you might find in an Assault Coast game, similar to something like Fall Guys or Total Wipeout, or Takeshi's Castle, or games of that nature. And I was enjoying making them so much that I decided, hey, why not keep going with this and see where it goes? I'm now at the point where I'm fairly happy and ready to sort of say it's almost finished, but I wanted to highlight some of the key changes and things that I did when porting this project to mobile. So let's see that progress. Firstly, the game was made in Unreal Engine, and that comes with a lot of conveniences. Like, things will just scale and a lot of stuff will just work. So it's not like it's going to be a whole rebuilding task, which is great. But what I needed to do was set up some mobile controls. And what I did is I used a simple widget to create a jump button, and I used the default Unreal stick for movement. And you can see this now. Fired this off and did a test on my mobile. So I captured this on mobile. Now at this point, the game's got its basic mechanics in there, and you can see it's using a lot of the stuff that we actually made in the tutorials. Okay, there's also a bug in there too. There was lots of bugs and stuff to figure out as we were going. But yeah, it was cool to see it on device. Next was replacing the assets. So some of the main considerations here were that the model should be fairly simple. The higher poly count means the more demanding the game. And obviously when you're going for Android, there's a lot of different devices and you want to just sort of make sure it's going to be universally fine. The player would also need creating, and in the past I've had issues with like too many bows or complex like bow structure and rigs. So this time what I used just to make it easier myself is I used some Mixamo for the animations, and some of the assets I got from Kenny's Assets to just start blocking things out. And what you'll see sort of the flow around there is that too. I also added sort of a finish line to my game just to make it a bit more of a complete sort of project. But the thing that is seen at the end as well is the rice bowl section, which I ended up sort of cutting out of the game just because I thought it might be too complex with those mobile controls. Then there was also the design of the game and how it would be played. On PC, it's easy to have lots of buttons and good player control in movement with controls and keyboard and mouse and stuff, but on mobile that's not always the case. So over time, and after getting some play feedback, I kept tweaking and changing how the controls would work, testing out to see what's going to work best. And most people, the feedback I tended to get was that it should be more in line with other mobile games. They're sort of like locked to one axis, and how that would help it really. And again, just you can see the progress here, the game starting to take shape, adding more like assets, trying to make it look a bit more like a game. It also took the swing out, the physics swing, just because with the sort of controls, how there's going to be and the auto running, they're just stuff that's really going to work best for the actual game and the gameplay, making sure it's fun. You can start to see it's a more complete game and it's taking shape. The next thing to do was to start adding a bit more sort of play feedback and just refining a lot of the design for this process, sort of iteration, and see how things go. And I've got like particle systems in there now, which brings me to the next point, and that's when you're uploading a project to Google Play Store, it should be less than 100 meg. So where possible, what I always try to do is I try to reuse a lot of textures, and you can see my textures if I sort of bring them up on screen. Quite often they'll be less than 512. You probably want to sort of say less than 512 by 512, and I've just used sort of grayscale for the most part, black and white textures. Obviously this isn't always the case. At one point I did test out with a normal map, but I think in the end I got rid of all my normal maps. So it's just a case of keeping your textures simple, keeping them small, and that's going to allow the processing to be done fairly cheaply, and the game should run a bit better for it. Like I say, quite simple textures across the most part. Like the levels are just all pretty much repeating of this simple checker texture, and I think, yeah, there wasn't really too many complicated text. In fact, no, there was one. And that was the fire, which I made a particle system for, and that ended up being, I think that's probably the heaviest texture in here. This is 1024 by 1024, but even that is not, too insane. But I figured it's not something that's going to get a lot of attention. It's just you run by it at the end. Another good optimization trick for Unreal is to remove and simplify your lights and fog. So I did eventually, like the fog was taking up a lot of memory size, a lot of sort of file size with the actual project. Like if I open up my level folder, showing Explorer, you can see like this map and its build data was just under 9 meg. So by removing the fog and simplifying some of the lighting systems, I was able to save a lot of memory there. And then it just, once I was mostly happy with, my level blueprints, because you don't want to be repeating a lot of steps. So once you're mostly happy with how things are working and everything's working okay, is the time to start duplicating your maps. And like I mentioned before, it was a case of optimization. So a lot of the assets, a lot of the floor, it's basically just using the same texture. They're just material instances with different colors, just to make each map feel a little bit different. And then it's moving around, adding different blueprints and planning out your level, making sure it's going to play nicely, and each level should feel unique. So again, it's iteration, just going through and refining. One thing that I did find as well was that on some of the levels I had a broken bridge asset, which was from a destructible mesh, but I was having issues with that on mobile phone. So eventually I broke that up and tried to recreate it in a different way for that to work properly. But I think in terms of like some of the main issues, that's the main ones. Those are the main things to keep looking at. So over time, I fleshed this out, added some like more assets, kept refining it, replacing some of the placeholder stuff until I've built around 9 levels. I created a nice sort of interactive menu system, which I was quite happy with, where you've got a player that can swap outfits, a couple of settings, and it all sort of interacts based on the world. The thing I would always say, and whenever I've made games in the past, you change the menus so many times. Like you'll start with the design, and as you're going through and as you're iterating, eventually you're just like, no, I hate it. And I was having a real issue trying to figure out the best way to display all the maps and that map information. And now the game's finally at a point where I would say it's mostly done, and I'm happy with it. I've gone through, added that extra bit of flare and flash, like a better particle system at the end. It still needs a bit of tweaking and refining, but it's good. I'd say it's mostly good now. I've replaced like a lot of the assets, and yeah, I think it's almost ready to be added to the Google Play Store. I'm not going to bother, I don't think, with iPhone, because I've made iPhone games before, and I know it's just, there's a lot of extra steps, like moving it across to Xcode and publishing from a Mac, and there's a higher annual fee. I think it's about £100 these days to upload your game to iPhone as well. So unless the game does good numbers, then I possibly would. But yeah, I think ultimately the project ended up quite well. And thanks for watching. If there is anything in this video you like, how did you make that? How did you create some of these systems? then I'd be happy to go through and show you a bit more information, do like more in-depth tutorials on different aspects of it. But hopefully you found that useful. Thanks for watching, and if you are interested, I will come back and update this video with a link once the game's out. Should check the description, or give it a go, test it, let me know, give me some feedback. Love to hear from you guys in the comments. So that's all. Cheers.